Welcome, Brescia parents, friends and staff. We're happy to be with you, to be able to offer you this exciting opportunity to share with our Innovation Committee, who have done all the planning and organisation. Thank you so much to all those people for this event, under the headship of our IT and Innovation Head, Mrs. Liz Crichton, and to the parents who you'll be seeing soon, who have been kind enough to share their experiences with us this evening. I'm going to now hand over to Mrs. Barella, who's going to read our school digital citizenship pledge.
Good evening to everyone. Today, the 9th of February, is International Safer Internet Day. So it is quite appropriate that we host this webinar this evening. Last year in 2020, we undertook a digital citizenship pledge. Today, we renew this pledge and our commitment to digital citizenship. Good evening. Today is the 9th of February and it is International Safer Internet Day. So it is most appropriate that we are hosting this webinar this evening. In 2020, we undertook a digital citizenship pledge, and tonight we renew our commitment to digital citizenship. I pledge that I will own my hashtag online. I will think with empathy, like with integrity, create with authenticity, share with care, act responsibly, connect mindfully, be the I in kind. Thank you. We hope you enjoy the evening.
Okay, good evening everybody. We are joined here this evening by our wonderful panel in front of us, just to speak a bit about our digital citizenship awareness, but not only just being aware of what it means to be a digital citizen, but especially what it means to be a digital ambassador in our current age and climate. So I'm going to hand over to our very experienced panel, starting on the opposite side, and let everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll get going.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Bala. I'm half of the Balas, and I'm a mom, obviously, and a momager. I'm basically a Ghanaian Polish who speaks German, who has 2 daughters and 1 on the way. And my background is in marketing, although I do have a passion for technology. And I used to manage my husband, who came out of corporate. So I've been both in the corporate world and as an entrepreneur. And obviously with COVID, I lost a lot of what I was doing in terms of our company. But part of my interest has always been in social media, so I also help other small businesses engage on social media and grow their business. And that's, I guess, my pivot, if that's still a word.
Okay, I'm Loyiso and Bala, a musician by profession, by trade. I don't know, is that like still a thing? But otherwise, I also work at TVN Africa, which is a Christian television channel that's on DSTV. Obviously, you know, just over this time, this COVID period, we've also had to kind of find new digital ways and new opportunities within that, in terms of how we, I'm trying to not also use the word pivot, okay? How we change, adapt to this new normal. There's another word. Okay, I think I'll stop writing, but otherwise, yes, father of 2 girls here in Brescia, soon to be 3, and yes, yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Loyiso. Nice to meet you, and great to be here, and a good evening to everybody watching this evening. My name is Alkema, and mechanical engineer by training, but IT professional in terms of my career, over 20 years, and currently at a large bank in South Africa, FNB, and help lead the digital transformation there. So I have some credentials, in addition to children between the age of 8 and 12, to talk about this important topic of digital citizenship. So great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Good evening, my name is Sarah Njamu. I run a digital transformation company. I've got a teaching background. I'm actually a qualified high school maths teacher that started running a digital transformation company 13 years ago. And I am very, very passionate about digital transformation. And so I look forward to just having a great discussion this evening around digital citizenship. Thank you.
So essentially we're here as digital citizens, we are here also as digital ambassadors, and we're also here in the space as being educator professionals, parents, and students alike. Thank you. Okay, so to get our conversation going, we essentially looking at the idea of parenting in a digitally disruptive world, but also furthermore the idea of being good ambassadors within that social scope, and what it means to be mom and dad, or dads and moms to children that are continuously engaging with social media. And we obviously all know, and we can all agree on the front, that turning our devices off or stopping social media is not how we parent. It's not going to be how we're able to parent or educate. So it's about learning to grapple with that. So in terms of why do we feel education on digital citizenship is really important, I think is a good starting point for us. So I'm going to hand over to Peter and see how we go from there.
We were chatting earlier and you used such a brilliant term called this digital space, that we all inhabit. And so just to talk about the importance of digital citizenship in this space, I think it's just important for us to frame a couple of the principles, as to why perhaps we should be a little bit concerned and why we need to take actions like, for example, have a pledge, that we read out tonight and Brescia had put in place in this community. So the digital space, if I was to call it and give it the term that we're probably all more used to, is the internet. And I think it's very important that we understand, our lives have been changed by the internet. That's been accelerated in the last year. It's become necessary and important. Businesses like banking have, taken advantage of that acceleration and the many dangers that come with it. But the internet is really one big funnel. It's really a big funnel. You've been in marketing, you're in digital transformation, and those of us that are a little bit older and wiser, we can see the sales pages, we can see the content, and the internet really as a self-sustaining machine, and it's probably the greatest achievement of democracy, is to connect every single living human being on the planet, basically. But the way it works and the way that it is self-sustaining is it requires two things. And we need to understand what those two things are, and we need to understand those so that we can educate our children as they go into this digital space and hopefully take advantage of the good things and be careful of the bad things. The internet needs two things to survive: action and data. And everything that the internet does, and every experience that we have, which is digital, you mentioned social media. Social media is just a form factor, a web page, an app on our phone or a device, is all geared towards encouraging, initially, action. Whether it's a click on a post, or whether it's making a post, or writing a blog article, or buying something, those are all actions that we as humans take in this digital space, as you called it there. And the more action we take, the more trust we build up with whoever it is that we're interacting with. And we get to the point where we ultimately surrender some data. And data is the primary currency of this digital space that we call the internet. So those are two important concepts, I think, that we must understand and be concerned about. And because we have the benefit of experience, we're a little bit more wary of it. Now, if you take a children's perspective, and we here tonight are all here as teachers, parents, or teachers and parents, we have a responsibility through things like the digital citizenship to help our children take the right steps and actions and the right behaviors and so on to be careful and to get the right advantages out of the internet. So, in return for the two things that the internet requires from us, what are the two things that children are the most vulnerable about? Number one is trust. And we also, we also rely on trust to interact. And if you talk about digital citizenship, a WhatsApp group is a group of like-minded people with a common objective that has citizenship in a digital space, which is ring-fenced within the internet. So trust is important, and I think through our conversation this evening, trust is going to come through quite a lot. If you look at these principles, a lot of that talks to trust. The other important one, and specifically at the age of children, as they become aware of the internet, become self-aware as people entering into the world, etc., is affirmation. Now, Simon Sinek talks brilliantly about affirmation that you get from social media. It releases dopamine in the mind, and you can become addicted to that affirmation. And as children go through those early phases of growth and adolescence, they deal with the stresses in different ways. Now, we as parents, if we bring our kids into the world, we are their primary source of affirmation. We eventually delegate that to teachers, children, friends, etc., become part of their broader circle. Now the internet takes advantage of the need for affirmation, combines it with its hunger and thirst for action. And the combination of its desperate desire for action, which ultimately leads to data, and our children's desire for affirmation. And once they get that affirmation, they build the trust. And once the trust is in place, they give the data. Now the data could be dad's credit card, or it could be the fact that I'm going to be at the shops waiting for my mom in the car park at 6 o'clock this evening. That's a point of vulnerability that has been created by action which has been taken as a result of a requirement for affirmation. So to get into digital citizenship, for us, what that really should do is, create some principles, potentially create some boundaries, so that when our vulnerable children, as they are still growing through their phases of life and becoming aware of the internet, see and interact with other avatars. They never interact with a physical person on the internet. They're acting with a digital form of that person. There are some principles that digital citizenship can give us. Now, whether it's a blue tick on a Twitter account, or whether it's a verified by Brescia piece of content that's been delivered to them on their iPad at home, there are some rules and principles that help them navigate through this world. But I do think we have to have the honest conversation about why, on the other side, we have to put those mechanisms in place. So just to maybe to kick off the conversation, we've got the internet that's hungry for action and data. And then we've got our kids that are desperate for affirmation. And we've relegated, the role of people in their lives to give them that affirmation. And we have to protect who they trust and what they do in the relationships on which that trust is based. So I think those are some of the fundamental principles that I'd like to just frame our discussion with, potentially as we then go into some of the, the sort of issues that become prevalent in our lives, and which have been accelerated in the last 18 months, Carl, as you mentioned.
And I think it's really important that, essentially, Peter, what you're talking about there is this idea of our digital footprint and the fact that safety comes into it by all means. I think it's one of the first things that we essentially look at. And what does it mean, essentially to be safe in a digital space? And I think that as parents, that also becomes the bigger question. And it's one thing us being safe in this environment, but it's another thing when we leave this environment and sort of when that environment, that ambassadorship that comes with it. But I think interesting, something that speaking about data and the internet's hunger for it, and that is exactly this idea of our digital footprint. And I want to hand over to the Balas there, and because as a family, you have a pretty broad digital footprint. And I think in terms of the mechanisms that go with that, how controlled is it? What comes into it? When do you hand over? And how do you, and I know both your girls understand what that digital space is. And I think particularly for parents who are not as digitally minded, but necessarily have to be digitally savvy. How does that factor in for you guys?
Okay, he's looking at me because it's me, and me. So obviously we have an advantage in that our kids are quite small. Almost 3 and 8. But like you said, they're very aware. It's very controlled. It might be the German in me, but they're too young to be running their own accounts, clearly. So that's never ever happened. They see stuff I make. They're obviously involved a lot because they have their own accounts because we do campaigns for companies, influencer kind of campaigns, a lot of toy reviews, that kind of thing, and they enjoy it.
Yeah.
So obviously I don't force them to do anything. I make sure it's enjoyable for them. It's educational usually, or fun, because you have to laugh, and especially now during these times, you know, it puts smiles on people's faces. I always get comments like that made my day, and that makes my day, because that was the whole point of it. And it's also just to show, like with my little one, you know, it's also just to show how she's developing, things she does and things we do with her that are not necessarily to do with screen time. So it's also about parenting and just engaging as a family in general. So there's a lot I could say about this topic, but basically, so it is very controlled. They're very excited when they see what I do, because I shoot everything, I edit everything. So they're very happy with the end result, and they see that it's, you know, it makes sense and it's fun, and Lord, I did that and we actually made something out of it. But I mean, the older one, Kenzie, is 8 almost. She does understand that, you know, should there be funny messages on DMs, which thankfully I don't get a lot of. I sort of educate her age appropriately about the dangers, because as time goes on and the years pass, she will obviously be more aware of it. And I think by then she'll be so well versed in it. For her, even right now, it's not a thing. So after a while, she's over it and she's moving on to something else. She'd much rather play with a neighbor's kid or go to her cousins or go swimming. So it's really part of screen time. And my biggest tip is I don't have notifications. So unless I physically open the apps, I do not see anything. I don't have my phone pinging all the time. And I've had that probably for a couple of years already. So I'm not overwhelmed by everything. I can go for a week without posting anything online. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, so I mean, I know that Jen is talking specifically about, you know, about social media. And we kind of alluded to this earlier on, that you can't necessarily take your children off. All our children are active digitally. And let's speak about screen time. And it's all good and well to say, well, you know, I allow my kid 3 hours of screen time a day. I don't know if that is too much. Is that probably too much? Okay, cool. 2 hours. Okay. Eventually, it's about 2 hours. But I think what is important, though, is involvement. So many times, you know, it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to spend the time with you here, or you're going to spend the time doing something else. And then for those 2 hours, I'm going to leave you just to yourself. Our involvement with our kids is that even if they're having screen time, to try and not be doing something else if you're not doing anything, but to go then say, what are you on? And even she goes, oh no, I'm doing Minecraft. I'll be like, okay, cool, show me what that is. And so I think that in that way, it just, you know, it just kind of lets them know, do you know what I mean? And make them feel secure. And I guess like that trust that they need in knowing that, you know, digital is not just a thing that I run to when my parents are not there, but that it is part of our lives.
And you've got that direct involvement. So in a way, you're also educating yourself to what's going on. And I think that it helps in terms of, well, there's that first rule of the fact is that we can't ignore it. We have to be involved in it. And I think we have to sort of integrate it. So a little bit more in terms of the digital footprint, Sarah, being someone who is involved in digital transformation and in terms of that platform as well, how has that, or this idea of having a digital footprint, how is that factored into what you do and how you do it?
So when we look at the programs that we offer, especially for the schools, we try by all means to actually offer programs that are age appropriate as well. And for a long time, we opted to do offline programs, but obviously with the coming in of COVID-19, that has had to change as well. So when we offer the online programs, we ensure that the programs are child-friendly and that you know, there's safety precautions that have been put in place as well.
Okay, and I think that that's really important. I think that ultimately what we're getting a sense is that we have to be those safety precautions for our children. And I think that, you know, from an educational space, that's what we do in a classroom. And I don't think it should be any different in a home environment. And I think that, you know, I always find that if I don't know something, then I don't know it. So I need to learn about it, and I need to read about it, and I need to find out more information in order to speak confidently about it, or in order to just speak about it at all, I suppose. So I think that's something that I've taken away, particularly in terms of the climate that we're in and the shift with COVID-19 and moving into an online space. It's a lot of it has to do with, okay, so if I've got to do something, I need to know how to do it so that I can combat when it goes wrong. And I think that, you know, there's many instances where it can go wrong. And I think that, Peter, in the sense, where would you feel would be one of the bigger red flags for you in terms of social media, in terms of the internet safe space, in terms of parenting children at home as well, when it comes to digital citizenship?
I think it's definitely this, you know, vulnerability that children have to, or the inability to distinguish, you know, on the internet between, you know, the real and the fake, or the created, and the real intention behind the internet. And we spoke about, you know, the thirst for data and action, and there are obviously some very good and genuine, you know, intentions behind that. But I think, to your point, it's where there are negative intentions, you know, behind that thirst for data and action. I think, to your point, you said you switch off the messaging. I think that's critical, because it's that one-on-one messaging. As I spoke about the internet being a funnel, you know, so ultimately that funnel is going to result in the giving of some data. You know, so that data is going to be much more readily given through, you know, the instant messaging. So I think that's number one for me, would be a major concern. And then the second, I think, would be just the risks around the self-confidence issues, you know, that, you know, children interacting in a digital space and the permanence of the digital footprint, you know, can create. You know, so I think we all joke around the fact that thank goodness there was no Facebook when we were in varsity, hey, Loyiso? Okay, yeah, or mix it, okay. Open space, you're on MySpace. Okay, but that is a reality. And, you know, Social Dilemma, fantastic, you know, movie. And, you know, we've all seen the risks that, you know, that those photographs that go out there, you know, there's a permanence there. You know, yes, there is lawsuits around the right to be forgotten. But you know, that's not going to help your 12-year-old daughter who's had a picture of herself posted on the class WhatsApp group, or even the class Teams channel, which is inside a protected, managed environment, or even if the daughter's being kicked out by one of the other kids. You know, so I think that it's a magnification of the self-confidence issues that they already face in a physical environment is magnified in digital. You spoke just now about the acceleration, you know, through digital transformation, and which companies have taken advantage of. I think you have the reverse negative effect on children who are now so much more reliant on that device, even more in 2020, and it's going to open up now, and that device just becomes one of a range of stimuli in their lives. But previously, when it was everything, you know, those self-confidence issues are compounded by any negative messaging that they're getting from them, creating a vicious cycle that the affirmation or the promise of relief from those issues, much like an alcoholic will turn to alcohol, or a drug addict will turn to drugs, the reliance on the dopamine to relieve those issues by turning once again to your social media account and the number of likes, etc., that you got, perpetuates that vicious cycle. And as you said, I think, and we've mentioned now, parents and teachers have a role to break that cycle and partner with our children in their interaction in that digital space. So those would be two of my sort of thoughts on that.
Very much so. I think that the partnership is crucial. I think, you know, speaking as an educator, but then also understanding that I engage in that partnership every day. And I think it's also, for me, the notification thing is actually really interesting, because I also don't get notifications on my phone at all. They're off, so I have to physically see it before I pick it up. And my family always laughs because they can never get hold of me when they need to. And I said, but that's how it is, especially if I'm in a classroom. You know, I don't need that distraction when I'm engaging with people in front of me as well. So I think that monitoring in that partnership becomes very important. But I think also, you know, we've sort of got this scenario, and I think you spoke a bit about it in terms of that understanding that the dopamine levels and the fact that we've got WhatsApp groups, and we've got all of these sorts of things. And I mean, like, Candy Crush is one of those games that were created to prey on that idea of dopamine. So there is definitely a reliance and an addiction that comes with social media. But I tend to feel that addiction was something that was bigger a couple years ago than it is now, purely based on the fact that our girls, particularly at Brescia, do know how to navigate social media. They know how to navigate that digital space. But I think what is the concern when it comes to that screen time again is something that you guys both, well, sort of everybody's really spoken about, that idea of screen time. And so the answer is not to turn them off, but then how do we make that space productive in terms of that partnership that we spoke about?
I think just one thought before, maybe I know you were going to say something, but that's why we go back to principles. So the thirst for data and action is always going to be there. It's going to manifest in different ways. And as we figure out, okay, social media is bad and we manage it, that thirst for data and action will manifest in other ways. Gaming, educational platforms is going to be manipulated. So for our children to understand the principles is so important so they can interpret whatever comes in front of them, I would suggest.
So it's also important to realize that the virtual world has got a virtual culture. There's a culture that reigns in that space, and it's the responsibility of the parents, and obviously the teachers are doing their best to teach the children what etiquettes are actually required for you to live successfully in the virtual world. And I think understanding the virtual culture is crucial for every child that is engaged in online activities.
I think that's a really interesting point, this idea of a digital culture. I mean, we operate in a space that is very socially driven, and the fact that we have a sense of culture within ourselves and within our communities. And I think that speaks to our bigger idea of being an ambassador, and the etiquettes that you speak about. What would, like, if I can just go around, what would be some of the tips in terms of how we hone those various etiquettes and which ones should be priority in terms of our understanding, being digital citizens, being digital practitioners, as well as ambassadors in that?
Yes, so it's very important for the children to understand that you can, not even just the children, the adults as well, that you cannot just connect with strangers.
Yeah.
You should always be purposeful. Why do you want to connect with the people that you're connecting with? And also we need to have those conversations with our children, highlighting to them the dangers and the threats that exist in the virtual world.
Nice.
Carl, I mean, I'm just looking at the pledge that we read out earlier, and I mean, I think if I just pick a couple of these words, you know, empathy acknowledges that there's a massive dependency on my response to that person's content in the digital culture. Mindfulness takes away the superficial nature of just chasing, you know, the latest affirmation that I'm getting, you know, from this digital space, you know, that I'm inhabiting. And then ultimately, I think acting responsibly, just to pick out a few of these, you know, take some of the physical culture of understanding good and bad and the importance of developing meaningful relationships with real people, and says, well, apply that in your new unique way in your digital interaction. And children will interpret that in different ways. But again, a charter and principles are treating kids like future adults that will defend them not just only now in the current form factors of this hungry internet,
but in all the form factors that are going to come at them in the future. It is a public platform. So many times when you are in front of your computer, you can so easily think that it's just you and the avatar. As someone, you know, I don't know if you still kind of call, you know, who's been in the celebrity world, if you ever said anything to just anywhere and somebody got to hear it, the following day you'll see it on the papers. But now this is immediate, and I think, you know, no one should ever think that what they say will not be heard. For instance, we're speaking about data. Well, your actions actually become data, and it's probably going to haunt you for a good 5 to 10 years. Definitely. Because as soon as whatever you do, whether it's Google, whether it's going to be Facebook, they're going to show it to be a certain person. Those are the ads that you're going to see, and that's the content that's going to come towards you. So what I'm saying is that I'm not in any way trying to instill fear or say instill fear into your kids, or whether we should do that to ourselves. But just be aware that this is a public platform. If you will not say whatever you're going to say or act in a certain way on top of this roof, when this place is full of kids, and they're all watching you in the spotlight,
Definitely.
then think twice before you say it, before you do it.
Definitely. And I think we get that whole idea of keyboard heroes and that sort of thing. And I think it's really important that we understand that if we don't, think with empathy, and we don't act mindfully and act responsibly, that we're not going to get very far. And I think that something that I find particularly interesting is that we don't always realize, and you were saying in terms of that social space, sort of being a celebrity, and I think that when we've got access to Twitter accounts, and we can say what we feel, and that whole idea of freedom of speech, and you spoke about the internet being one of the biggest gifts of democracy, essentially, and it is. I mean, it's this whole idea of having a voice, but I think the responsibility that comes with that voice is something that I think our children have had to discover far earlier in life than we ever had to, so to speak. If you want to comment on that as well.
So much can be said for that particular question, but I think in terms of culture in general, I think it's important to teach them that it's permanent. So anything you put out there is permanent. Like my husband, it's your digital footprint.
Yeah.
And like my husband was saying, if you aren't going to do it in private, then you should think twice about doing it there, on social media. Especially for older kids, I think they need to realize that they're by default shaping their brand, so to speak, their personal brand. At the same time, obviously you have to understand that someone who's tweeting or posting as a 16-year-old is not necessarily going to be the same at 25 years.
Yes.
However, most employers don't necessarily care about that, which is actually a bit of a double-edged sword, because they should understand that that person has evolved and grown into an adult, right?
Completely.
But I think we need to then teach our children that, first of all, social media specifically is a snippet. It's not a blow-by-blow reality show of your life. It's usually highlights of things that you wish to share. So it's really your control on what you're sharing. If you don't share anything, no one knows anything. So it's also that the child needs to know, and the parent needs to engage with the child on emotionally, what are you trying to do? Like, why are you cyberbullying? Or why are you commenting negatively? Or why do you feel like you have to say that, even though you wouldn't say that to someone's face? And the irony of that is, they feel safe behind a keyboard, but it's actually the most public you'll be.
Yes.
So if you wouldn't dare say that to someone's face, or you want to keep it secret because now you're posting these secret things, but actually everybody can see, the whole world can literally see it. So they need to understand that, and I think, as they grow older, so I feel like, I'm not saying what I'm doing is right because we're in a completely different space, but like I said, my kids aren't actually physically necessarily involved on the phone or on an iPad, but by the time they get to that age, they will understand it very in depth. So, and I'm already teaching them about the dangers like we spoke about already. So I think they need to just understand that culture. And the thing is, the culture evolves. So a lot of influencers, for example, are setting the standard, which is what we spoke about. So if someone decides to post an inappropriate bikini shot, it becomes, oh, that's okay, let me post one too. But I think that's where parenting really has to come in. It's like anything in life. It's not, I don't see social media as something separate. It's part of life now. So it's, for me, the same as school, education, activities, you know what I mean? It's just another element we have to now be well versed in. And I think the problem is when parents are not necessarily that way inclined. We happen to be, I guess maybe being Gen X. So we get the best of both. But not everyone is that way inclined, and they will have to unfortunately go the extra mile to make an effort to understand it at least enough to be able to educate their children.
Definitely.
And can I just say something? In the same way, and I'll be very quick, because I understand that you're running out of time, right? But your kids will follow how you act more than what you say.
Hugely.
That hasn't changed for centuries. Do you know what I mean? So, in the same way that you will find what your kid was probably looking at 5 days ago, and you're going to go and reprimand them. In the same way that what you have on the internet, these kids are very technical savvy. They're going to find that post. They're going to find what you said, and they can even just go and look at your history and see the things that you've been doing. So I think before even trying to decide how to parent, I think we as parents need to learn how to conduct ourselves.
Completely. I think transparency becomes something that's so important there as well. Sarah, do you want to just finish off there for us?
Yes, so The one conversation that we've been having with our daughters is about the importance of creating a positive digital image, because people are coming to look at who you are from the social media. So if you're looking for a job or you're going to apply to a tertiary institution, if people want to learn about you, the first place they're going to is to the social media. And my conversation is always, do you think what you have put out there will make you very proud when another person looks at it? So that's a very, very important conversation to have with the children.
And that's that idea of authenticity and integrity coming through again as well. If there are any questions, if we could hear some questions coming through, because I'm pretty sure we can just continue. But if there are any questions, please do post them for the Q&A so that you can address them to any of us. You are not only a social media, internet, IT guru, you're also a doctor and a published author.
Thank you, Carl.
So tell us about your book. Tell us about.
Well, I mean, that's based on my day job as helping to lead digital transformation at a bank, and really that talks to the principles of digital disruption. Okay. So, in a business context, what are the forces that have changed the business landscape? Pretty much in the last 20 years. So, since the year 2000. Half of the Fortune 500 companies have dropped off completely. Now we've seen all these household names pop up and give us the convenience of a ride on the street corner or a bed in a foreign country that we'd have to go to a hotel and all the rest of it. We know these names and we've obviously maybe used them ourselves. But why those have happened? What are the forces and the principles? So in the book I talk about the idea of radical product innovation. So I talk about how you cannot innovate a candle to get a light bulb, same for a horse-drawn cart to get to a motor vehicle. And those same product innovation principles are what has disrupted the business world today. And in the book, so that's the first few chapters, if people are interested to go and get a bit of insights about that. And we were chatting earlier, I mean, I think Loyiso, you did a course at Gibbs, and just to get the concepts, and so to debunk, some of these ideas, and that's what I try and do in the book. And in the second half, I talk about digital transformation, which is then the business world's response to disruption. So there's really been two main aspects of that. One is for the large incumbent banks, of which I work for one that's been around for 180 years, and we'd like to be around for another 180 years. So we have to defend against that digital disruption. We have to change our business model. We have to think from the outside in. We have to understand the principles and why the game has changed in business. But equally, the startups that have taken advantage of that and had the exponential growth and are challenging the big companies has completely changed the way the companies are responding to their markets, to their customers, and developing new products. And all of that was accelerated in 2020. So the book hopefully breaks down some of those principles, and it's free tonight if you'd like to click on the link. Just a quick product push would be great. Thank you very much for the support. Free tonight on Amazon, an internet marketplace. Hopefully that you can trust.
So it's an interesting concept that you speak about, the idea of startups. Now, I would like to link that in terms of the fact that our children are our startups, and essentially in terms of that business scope. And I think that, we speak about this idea of being digital ambassadors, and we've contextualized the idea of what it means to be a digital citizen, and we've spoken about the pledge. But what is our responsibility to our wider community? Beyond Brescia, beyond our families, what do we feel that responsibility is? Let's just go around quickly and then we'll come back to one of the questions we've got from the audience.
So, Jen touched on this, earlier on, for the fact that, as influencers, how did you sort of phrase it again? But in terms of, influencers set the standard.
Yeah.
And if you kind of look around just how much policies they're trying to put around digital, it's not governments who are setting the policies.
Yeah.
It's sort of like governments actually reacting. They're not even responding. They are reacting to what's happening because it is society that sets the standards of what is of what is allowed, of what is accepted and what is not accepted. I think you guys are already doing this thing actually pretty right, you know? To say, okay, cool, we want digital citizen ambassadors, citizenship ambassadors, but digital citizen ambassadors to really kind of own the narrative. You see, the thing is, I mean, there's an old saying that says that when good men keep quiet or do nothing, evil prospers, right? And it's exactly the same concept. You know, the more people that can speak against things like cyberbullying, the more people that can speak against discrimination, the more sort of like those policies won't necessarily have to be written, but it's going to be, it's going to form part of the culture. Yeah. So, you know, that's why I'm not saying just because you want good children, take them off social media. Yeah. As a matter of fact, make them digital, you know, like responsible digital citizens who can be ambassadors, who can influence what is already happening there.
Yep, and I think it becomes really important if we don't, again, it's that idea you spoke about modeling that behavior, and I think that's key. Yeah.
Just to quickly build on to what he was saying, so especially in the public space, so he's obviously, we're in the public eye, so people actually look to you for reference, whether it's good or bad. I mean, you don't necessarily ask for it, it just happens part of your job, it's a job hazard. And so as long as kids understand that, also these are people, okay, they're not the law, it's not written in the Bible, do you know what I mean? These are just people you're following, that you aspire to be like, or you identify with. It was actually a bigger point, but my preggy hormones have kicked in, sorry. But basically, you get the gist of it. It's like they just need to understand that this is not real life. Like you said, it's a snippet of life. And I think when you're authentic, obviously, yes, I mean, we post things that are just us. So there's no pretending to be someone else or anything like that. I think that's very tiring, and I think you'd burn out very quickly. But for some people it works. So they need to understand both sides of everything. So, you know, there are people who only post polished things, and that's the space they're in. They're walking advertisements, basically. And there's a place for that. There's a place for everybody. So I think you touched on that, Peter, earlier about the psychological impact. I've already started educating my 8-year-old about the fact that, first of all, screen time is very bad for your brain development. And she's like, oh my God, I'm going to switch off the screen. You know? No, because they're impressionable. And not everything you see on YouTube or social media or on TikTok is actually real. These are created, like the same way we created a video for whichever brand, they've created that so that you believe that that's actually true, you know what I mean? And it's all computer animation, green screens and this and that. It's just like, oh, that's very interesting. So she started learning about it. And I think the more we just, day by day, slowly, I mean, it's not to overwhelm any parent out there, but just in bite-sized pieces, age-appropriate pieces, you know, just educate them. That was not your question, but sorry. it really makes a difference. And I think, I think my point was, in the larger public space, especially for someone who people follow just because of who you are or who your husband is or whatever, it's important, the messaging out there is important, because if you're not authentic and if you're not adhering to like your pledge here, they actually identify on that and say, oh, well, she said it's fine, so I can swear, I can do this, I can do that, because it's perfectly acceptable. And so if you want to lead by example, you know the saying, be the change you want to see. So that's the motto really I live by on social media.
In addition to that, I would like to contribute that children need to hold each other accountable. And also as digital ambassadors, you know, we all need to be thinking of how to keep the next person safe online, and that will come as a result of holding each other accountable. So if you see anybody posting something that is inappropriate, you know, talk to them, engage with them, and that should be one of the things that we are quite intentional about.
It's definitely the idea of our social mandate in terms of that digital space. I think that we can all attest to either not saying something or saying something in those instances. And then we've got a quick question here, just in the sense that, so what do each of you do in your home that ultimately protects your child against devices, social media, that idea of the digital space? So sort of what are like things or tips, I suppose, essentially, that you would use?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, we sort of use the Apple ecosystem, and I think the operating system that they released, you know, a year or so ago has now got the family management capability with screen time and app management. And so if you go into that dashboard, you can actually see, you know, your kids' devices. The Apple family only allows up to 6. Unfortunately, as, you know, we're not all covered in the whole family, but the 5 kids, you know, myself and them, I can have a look at all their devices and what they're doing and how they're spending their time, but then also proactively limit that screen time and talk them through the footprint that they create and that I can monitor and I can see. And the other thing I think, just practically to answer the question there is, and I think a lot of parents do this anyway, all devices in a common family area overnight or after a certain time in the evening, and then absolutely all passcodes are shared. And while you may not want to be authoritarian, the knowledge of the child that you can, and you often do go in and check their device, I think just creates that accountability and maybe that integrity that you're looking for in the charter here.
Yeah. Sarah?
So in our family, we've really been intentional about having technology talk as a family.
Yeah.
So we talk about the do's and the don'ts and how you keep yourself safe online. We engage around that just so that we make sure our girls are very equipped on how they carry themselves when they're online.
I think that that's a really good piece of advice in terms of the idea of equipping young minds to engage in that space, especially because, you know, we know that there are predators out there. We know that there are people that are looking for that information, and ultimately, how do we allow ourselves, or how do we not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of that? I think those conversations are very important.
Maybe just a quick story. My daughter came to call me the other day. I was in the garage doing something, and she said, "Dad, I think I want an iPhone." But I don't know if I should click anything. So I said, "Okay, good that you called me." So we go into a bedroom, and I think, okay, this is a learning opportunity, and now I get to demonstrate, you know, exactly to your point and the question in the Q&A. Sit down and have a look at it, www.freeiphone.com or whatever it goes. So immediately the alarm bells start going off in my head. And she says, "No, but Dad, I mean, it's got all these stars, and, you know, it's now I'm going to win this iPhone and everything, and I'm so excited, you know, the affirmation, right?
Yeah.
And it wants the action, and it wants the data." Now, I know because I design those things, and we're all in marketing and sales. So, 2 points. I said, "Sweetheart, just scroll down to the bottom, and there should be, because of the rules of the internet, which there are good principles of the internet, scroll down to the bottom and you'll see some fine print." And she read the fine print, and it was, "This is a free draw, and you may be contacted in 3 months, but you've got to give us your date," and all the rest of it. She says, "Ooh, I wouldn't do this." And I said, "But next time, just scroll down to the bottom of the website." Second thing I did was use the internet against the internet. So I said, take that website and go to Google and say, "Can I trust www.freeiphone.com?" And immediately Google comes back and says, "Untrusted domain, it's had 30,000 complaints on the VeriSign authenticity website." And my daughter literally lifted her hands off the keyboard like this and said, "Wow, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to go any further." So there's the education that you were talking about, there's the learning opportunities, but there was also the risk at that moment that I had to take, you know, some control of.
And I think it's really important that we understand that those learning opportunities are going to arise, and we have to engage with them. Because if we just simply, and also our initial response is often to shut it down, as opposed to learning together and explaining and sort of going into that. Because if we don't actually have those conversations, and if we continuously look at, and you know, it's that whole idea of knowing your enemy, essentially. And I think it's really important that we understand that although the digital space is a space that is that means so much, and it's got a lot of positive elements, there are also a lot of nefarious elements out there as well. And I think that understanding how your enemy works is a very good strategy, you know, for any parent, I suppose, or any person who's involved in the digital space.
So I like the story that Peter has shared, and it just goes to show how important it is for parents to have a trusting relationship with their children, so that if the children want to engage in any activities that they're not very sure about online, they should actually be able to come to the parents and just double check if that's okay.
Definitely.
And it's up to us as parents to really establish those open lines of communication, and that is very, very crucial.
And I think that that's essentially what we spoke about earlier as well, this idea of transparency, knowing what's going on, but also having those conversations where it doesn't feel like that there is something wrong. And I mean, I know I have questions, from the girls in our class when, they say, so what is a VPN? What does it do? You have to engage, because if you don't teach them about these various things, then they're going to find that information out regardless of your input. You're just not going to be able to step it and be the medium between that information. I think it becomes quite important. And I guess we essentially have to sort of wrap up this process. But some of the key factors that I feel is that we've gained from this experience is not only understanding what it means to be an ambassador, but how important being a digital ambassador is. So just sort of closing thoughts when it comes to your own children, but also perhaps parents who aren't as like-minded or are necessarily still walking that path or walking that journey in terms of the introduction to it. What would your closing idea be with regards to the discussion that we've been having? I'll start on that side and move around.
So just to touch on the last question, also sort of all-encompassing, I think at the end of the day, it's also about how much time you spend with your children. Because if I'm doing other activities with them, they're not on the screen.
Yeah.
And that's really all it is. Or if they're outside doing activities or playing with friends or whatever the case is. Obviously during COVID that's a bit more difficult,
yeah.
But there's still things you can do. I mean, even if it's scooting or riding your bike up the road, going for a walk, discovering plants, depending how small they are. I mean, there's so many things. They actually really, really enjoy those things. They only really get stuck on the screen because we want mommy time or daddy time or parent time when he comes home from work or something. So it's really, we are still in control, I think, to a certain degree. Obviously, when you have teenagers, it might be a little bit less so. But I think once you've established that at a younger age, it's easier, like you said, with the open communication. I mean, my daughter will come and ask me if she can call her friend and play Minecraft. And then I'll say, okay, but have you done your homework? Have you done this?
Yeah.
If you have, and I'll check it or whatever the case is, then you can do X, Y, Z, and this is when you come off. Obviously, that's me saying, da, 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 da. She won't necessarily stick to it, but it's also learned, it's in progress. So sometimes she'll say, no, I have to go, or sometimes I'll have to literally yank her off it.
Yeah.
And that's just, age appropriate again. They forget about time. But she's also learning to watch the time, even on Teams in class. She learns, so she knows how to read her schedule. She preps in the morning. She knows what it is. She knows when the next subject is. So that's what I mean by it's part and parcel of life.
Yeah.
It's not a standalone, isolated, sphere of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe just to add on to that, which is also kind of like my closing bit, which is the fact that we always have to remain the security to our children. My dad taught me how to ride a bicycle when he didn't even know how to ride a bicycle. How many children out there have parents who, well, at least, back in the days, if I can put it like that, who didn't get the opportunity to get the qualifications that they had, but yet they still guided them to get masters and to become doctors. I know many people like that. And so, my advice to parents is that you may not know as much as your child knows in terms of, in terms of operating all these digital devices, but you can still guide them by becoming the security in that. So show interest where you can. They will understand if you do not know everything. It's okay to say, I'm going to come back just now. Go to the room, take out your phone and Google. You know what I mean? And come back as if you're the one. But the more calm that you are about it, the more calm that they're going to be about it too. If your answer is going to be no all the time, they're going to start being curious on the fact that why is it no, and then they'll start going in there to try and find those answers. So maybe just to end it up, I think, just be the security that your child needs in your home so that they can come to you. They can ask you the questions. And when you don't know it, they're like, well, let's go find out. And so this, I believe, this is forever now. So that you can really just kind of walk this together with them, holding their hand up until such a point that they can really be secure to go on their own.
Yeah, nice.
Carl, thanks. Wonderful discussion. Closing thoughts would be, to your point earlier about good people needing to do something. The action that you choose to take on the internet, I would advise that we produce more and consume less. So I'm passionate about producing educational content in the form of books and courses and videos, and I think you also do similar things. And as an example, my daughter, having learned what she did about Googling whether she can trust a certain domain, could convert that into a YouTube video and put that out to her friends, and she saves maybe 10 other friends from following down the same mistake. So we've got to take the battle to the internet and populate the internet with good educational content.
Definitely. I think that's a nice legacy as well.
My closing remarks would be for parents to understand that the internet offers a lot of opportunities, but at the same time there are risks and threats. So we need to leverage on the opportunities that are offered by the internet, and then we need to be able to understand how to work around the threats and the safety issues that come with having a digital online presence.
For sure. And I think that leveraging the internet is a really important idea. And I think that, I had this conversation with one of our girls the other day. We were talking about digital citizenship in class. And so I said, okay, so what is it? And the remark was, it's balance, Mr. B. And I said, okay, what does that mean? It's balance. Like, there's so much more. What does balance mean? And they said, it's about doing what you need to do online, but also understanding that that's one aspect of your life, that there are multiple other aspects. And I couldn't have encapsulated it better. And that came out of a 14-year-old's mouth, that it's about balance. And I think that so often we forget that in life there needs to be balance. So just as much as there are harms out there, there's also good. But we've got to construct and we've got to make that. And I think that idea of changing the space and making it a space that we are proud of, it's the same idea of democracy, essentially. It only works as long as the key actors and most vulnerable actors are part of the solution, are part of that voice. And so I think it's really important that we understand that being a digital citizen is being a balanced citizen. And I think it's being an ambassador for that idea of what balance is. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for the evening, and thank you for joining us and having this conversation.